There's a peculiar kind of invisibility in the digital age, not the kind born from exclusion, but the kind chosen deliberately, carefully. Scroll through your feed right now, you'll see faces everywhere, smiling at beaches, posing at parties, documenting breakfast, heartbreak, success, even solitude. The world has become a gallery where everyone is both artist and exhibit. But then there are the others, the ones who watch from the margins, who see everything but show nothing. No selfies, no stories, no proof they were ever there. You might know someone like this, you might be someone like this. And here's what everyone wonders, why? Why would anyone choose to remain unseen when the entire culture is built on being witnessed? It's easy to assume they're shy, insecure, hiding something, but the truth is far more complex and far more revealing about what we've all become. Because the psychology of people who don't post their pictures isn't about what they lack, it's about what they refuse to lose. The quiet observers. Let me tell you what most people miss. The ones who don't post aren't absent. They're watching. They see your vacation photos. They notice your new relationship. They caught that vague post you made at 2 a.m. and deleted an hour later. They know more about your life than people who comment on every picture. But here's the difference. They're not participating in the performance. They're studying it. While everyone else is reacting, arguing, posting their own response to the trend, these silent observers are just taking it in, processing, connecting dots that others miss because they're too busy creating content to consume meaning. They see the patterns, the way certain posts come right after breakups, the timing of the humble brags, the carefully constructed casualness of it all. They've cracked a code that most people don't even realize exists. Social media isn't documentation, it's theater. And once you truly see that, not just intellectually but viscerally, stepping onto that stage starts to feel less like connection and more like performance. They haven't rejected technology, they've simply chosen a different seat. Not on stage, not even backstage. They're in the audience, watching the show, with a kind of knowing sadness, because they understand something most performers don't. The applause is temporary, the performance is exhausting, and the real you, the one that exists before the lighting and the filters and the captions, that person gets lost somewhere between the lens and the like button. So they watch, they learn, they stay quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned that silence often says more. The freedom in invisibility. There's a word psychologists use, psychological ownership. It's the feeling that something belongs deeply, intimately to you. A memory, an experience, a moment of pure joy or devastating grief. And here's what happens when you post it. That ownership dissolves just a little. The moment you share becomes public property, open to interpretation, judgment, misunderstanding, even mockery. People who don't post are guarding something sacred. They're protecting their psychological ownership over their own lives. Think about it. When was the last time something beautiful happened to you and you didn't immediately think about how to frame it for Instagram? When did you last achieve something and feel complete satisfaction without needing to announce it? That reflex, that instinct to share, it's not natural, it's conditioned. A decade of dopamine loops and validation metrics has trained us to believe that experiences only matter if they're witnessed. But these invisible people, they've broken that conditioning. They've rediscovered something radical, the joy of private victory, the sweetness of unshared beauty, the depth of moments that exist only in memory, untouched by algorithms. They travel without tagging. They love without posting couple photos. They succeed without the announcement. And in that restraint, they find a kind of freedom most people have forgotten exists. Because when your happiness doesn't need an audience, it becomes unshakable. When your worth isn't tied to engagement metrics, it becomes yours again. They're not hiding from the world. They're reclaiming themselves from it. The ones who used to post. Not everyone who stays silent now was always this way. Some of them used to be the most active people you knew. Stories every day, photos everywhere, living their life out loud. Until one day, something shifted. Maybe they posted something deeply personal, and it became a spectacle. Maybe they shared their joy, and someone turned it into competition. Maybe they documented a painful moment hoping for comfort, and received judgment instead. Or maybe it was quieter than that. Maybe they just woke up one morning and realized that every beautiful moment had become a photo opportunity. that they were living their life through captions, that they weren't experiencing things anymore, they were performing them. So they stopped, not with a dramatic announcement, "No, I'm leaving social media" post, just a slow, quiet fade. Their last post sits there, weeks old, then months old, then ancient history. And here's what they discovered in that silence. They didn't miss it. The urge to share faded faster than they expected. The anxiety about what people might think of their absence dissolved. The need to craft their life into something consumable just disappeared. What they found instead was presence, the ability to be fully in a moment without thinking about how to capture it, the freedom to change, to fail, to grow without witnesses who remember the old version and expect consistency. They experienced a kind of emotional exhale, a release from the constant subtle pressure of being watched. And once you've tasted that freedom, going back feels impossible, because you've remembered what most people have forgotten, that you existed before the internet knew your name, and you'll exist just fine if it forgets. The confidence paradox. Here's what confuses people. Those who post the least often have the most stable sense of self. It sounds backwards, doesn't it? We assume silence equals insecurity. That invisibility means you're hiding from judgment because you can't handle it. But it's the opposite. The need to constantly post, to constantly remind people you exist, you're happy, you're successful, that often comes from a fragile foundation. An internal question that needs external answers. Am I enough? People who don't post aren't asking that question anymore. Or if they are, they're not looking to strangers on the internet to answer it. Real confidence doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't require 200 people to validate that your vacation was actually enjoyable. It doesn't need likes to confirm that you're attractive, or comments to verify that your achievement matters. These people have found something rare in the digital age, an internal locus of control. Their worth comes from within. It's not a stock that rises and falls with engagement metrics. It's steady, solid, theirs. And ironically, this makes them more authentic, because when you're not performing for validation, you're just being. You're not editing yourself into someone more palatable. You're not hiding the difficult parts or exaggerating the good parts. You're just you, complex and contradictory and complete. They've discovered that the truest version of yourself is the one nobody sees. The one that exists in private moments, in how you treat people when there's no one watching, in the thoughts you have that never become captions. That's the version they've decided to protect. Not because it's shameful, but because it's precious. Because once you put your authentic self online, it stops being yours. It becomes content, subject to trends, opinions, the cruel democracy of likes. So they keep it close, they keep it real, and they keep it theirs. Living in 3D, there's a moment that happens when you stop documenting everything. Your brain changes. You're at a concert, and instead of watching it through your phone screen, recording a video you'll never watch, you're actually there. You feel the bass in your chest. You notice the way the lights paint the crowd. You become part of the experience instead of documenting it. You're having dinner with friends, and you're not thinking about angles or lighting, or whether the food looks good enough to post. You're tasting it. You're laughing. You're present. People who don't post live in 3 dimensions, while everyone else is flattening their life into 2. They're not translating experience into content. They're just experiencing. And here's what's beautiful about that. They remember things differently, more vividly, because when your brain isn't split between being there and capturing it for later, it encodes the memory properly. The sensory details, the emotions, the ineffable quality that makes a moment matter. They can tell you how something felt, not just how it looked. They remember conversations, not just photo ops. Their memories are rich and textured because they were fully present when those memories were made. There's a cost to constant documentation that we rarely acknowledge. Every moment you spend framing, filtering, captioning, you're removing yourself from the actual experience. You're choosing performance over presence, proof over participation. And these invisible people, they've rejected that trade. They'd rather have the memory than the evidence. They'd rather live it once, fully, than capture it partially for an audience that will scroll past in 3 seconds. Their life isn't content. It's not material. It's not optimized for engagement. It's just theirs, lived deeply, felt completely, and kept sacred. The weight of being watched. There's a psychological term for what social media creates: self-presentational pressure. The constant awareness that you're being observed, even when you're not actively posting. You start thinking in captions. You evaluate experiences by their shareability. You make decisions not just for yourself, but for the invisible audience that might see it later. Where should we go for dinner? Somewhere Instagram-worthy. What should I wear? Something that photographs well. Should I go on this trip? Will it make good content? Your life stops being yours. It becomes a draft, constantly being edited for public consumption. For some people, this pressure becomes unbearable, not because they're weak, but because they're honest. They recognize that this constant performance is exhausting, that living for an audience means never truly living for yourself. So they retreat, not because they don't want connection, but because they want real connection. The kind that doesn't require performance or proof. The kind that exists in private conversations, in shared silence, in being fully known by a few rather than partially known by many. They're tired of the subtle anxiety that comes with visibility, the worry that a post will be misunderstood, the fear that silence will be noticed and judged, the pressure to seem okay even when you're not, to seem successful even when you're struggling. They want to be seen, but truly seen, not the curated version, not the highlight reel, the whole messy, beautiful, complicated truth of who they are. And that kind of visibility, they've learned, doesn't happen on social media. It happens across kitchen tables, in long phone calls, in the eyes of someone who knows you without needing to see your feed. So they choose depth over breadth, intimacy over audience, being fully known by a few over partially known by thousands. The relationship revolution. When you stop posting, something interesting happens to your relationships. They become real again. You stop having friendships that exist only in comments and likes. You stop maintaining connections that feel more like networking than actual care. You stop performing intimacy for an audience. Instead, your relationships simplify. They clarify. You learn who actually checks on you without a post prompting them. You discover who remembers your birthday without Facebook reminding them. You find out who wants to know how you're doing, not just what you're doing. The people who don't post have often built something rare. Relationships that don't need documentation. Love that doesn't require proof. Friendships that exist in texts, calls, and time spent together, not in tagged photos and public declarations. There's a depth to these connections that's hard to describe. When you're not performing your relationship for an audience, it becomes more honest, more vulnerable, more real. You can have the hard conversations without worrying about how it looks to others. You can be messy and complicated and human without needing to maintain an image. You can love someone without proving it to 500 people who don't actually care. And here's the beautiful irony. The strongest relationships in their lives are often invisible to everyone else. No couple photos, no anniversary posts, no public displays of affection. But ask them about their partner, their best friend, their family, and they can tell you stories, real stories, not captions, but truths, not performances, but presence. They've learned that the depth of a relationship isn't measured by how many people see it. It's measured by how fully you show up when no one else is watching. That's intimacy, not the performative kind, but the real kind. The kind that doesn't translate to social media because it's too nuanced, too complex, too sacred to reduce to a post. The comparison trap. They escaped social media is a comparison machine. It's designed to show you everyone else's best moments while you're living through your worst. You see the vacation photos, not the credit card debt that funded them. The engagement announcement, not the anxiety about the relationship. The promotion celebration, not the burnout that came before it. The fitness transformation, not the disordered eating that created it. And even when you know logically that you're seeing highlight reels, it still affects you. Your brain can't fully disconnect from the comparison. You can't help but measure your messy reality against everyone else's curated fiction. People who don't post have found a way out of this trap, not by leaving social media entirely, necessarily, but by observing it differently. They scroll with awareness. They see the performance for what it is. They enjoy the content without absorbing it as truth. They can appreciate someone's beautiful photo without letting it poison their own self-image. They understand something crucial. Everyone is struggling with something that doesn't make it to the feed. Everyone has failures they don't post, fears they don't share, moments of weakness they hide behind filters. This knowledge protects them. They can be happy for others without feeling diminished by others' success. They can scroll without spiraling. They can observe without absorbing, because they've remembered what we all used to know, that the most important parts of life, the growth, the grief, the transformation, happen quietly, privately, unseen, and you can't compare your full reality to someone else's partial performance. It's not a fair equation. It never was. The sacred privacy. In a culture of oversharing, privacy has become radical, almost rebellious. People who don't post understand something we've collectively forgotten. Not everything is meant to be shared. Some things are too sacred for that. They've drawn boundaries that others have dissolved. They've decided that their personal life is not public property, that their relationships don't need witnesses, that their struggles don't need commentary, that their joy doesn't need validation. This isn't about being secretive or paranoid. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that every time you make something public, you lose a little ownership over it. Once your relationship is on Facebook, it's no longer just yours. Once your achievement is on LinkedIn, it's subject to professional scrutiny. Once your pain is in a post, it becomes a topic of conversation you can't control. They want to keep things pure, uncontaminated by opinions and algorithms and the strange social dynamics of digital spaces. They want their private victories to stay private, their struggles to be processed without an audience, their transformations to happen without witnesses who might not understand. There's a kind of intimacy they're protecting, not just with others but with themselves. The intimacy of a life lived on your own terms, measured by your own metrics, valued by your own standards. And in a world where everything is monetized, optimized, and publicized, that's revolutionary. They're not hiding. They're honoring something, the sacred ordinary, the private profound, the moments that matter precisely because they're not shared. The dopamine detox. Here's what most people don't realize. Every like, every comment, every notification triggers a release of dopamine in your brain, the same chemical involved in addiction. Over time, you're not just using social media. You're hooked on the validation it provides. You check compulsively. You post anticipating the response. You measure your worth by the numbers. It's a cycle designed to keep you engaged. And it works because it hijacks your brain's reward system. People who don't post have broken free from this cycle. Not easily and not without withdrawal, but they've done it. And what they've found on the other side is stability. Their mood doesn't fluctuate based on engagement. Their self-worth doesn't depend on external validation. Their happiness doesn't need confirmation from strangers. They've rediscovered what psychologists call an internal locus of control. The sense that your life is shaped by your own choices, not by others' reactions. This is freedom, real freedom, not the absence of social media, but the absence of need for it. They can scroll or not scroll, post or not post. It doesn't control them anymore because they've found their validation elsewhere, in real achievements, real relationships, real self-awareness. Their confidence is quiet because it doesn't need applause. Their identity is solid because it's not being constantly reflected back by a digital mirror that distorts everything it shows. They've learned to sit with themselves in silence, to be enough without anyone saying they're enough, to exist fully even when no one's watching. And that's not loneliness, that's wholeness. The misunderstood silence. People make assumptions about those who stay silent online. They must be antisocial, depressed, hiding something shameful, judging everyone else from their high horse. But most of these assumptions are wrong. The quietest people online are often the most engaged in real life. They're at the gatherings, having the conversations, building the connections. They're just not broadcasting it. They're not depressed. Many of them are actually happier, more stable, more grounded than when they were constantly posting and seeking validation. They're not hiding something dark. They're protecting something precious, the authentic version of themselves that doesn't fit into a post. And they're not judging you for posting. They genuinely don't care what you do with your social media. They're just doing what works for them. The silence isn't emptiness. It's fullness that doesn't need expression. It's confidence that doesn't need confirmation. It's a life so rich that documenting it would feel like diminishing it. They carry worlds within them. They process deeply. They feel intensely. They just don't turn it all into content, because they've learned that not everything needs to be said, that some truths exist best in silence, that the most profound parts of being human, the growth, the doubt, the wonder, happen in spaces too sacred for sharing. Their silence isn't absence, it's presence, the deepest kind, the homecoming. When you stop posting, something unexpected happens. You come home to yourself. All those parts of you that got scattered across platforms and profiles and performances, they start coming back. You remember who you were before you had to be anyone for anyone else. Your thoughts become yours again. Not potential captions, just thoughts. Your experiences become experiences, not content opportunities. Your life becomes your life, not your brand. There's a reconnection that happens with your own intuition, your own values, your own quiet knowing that gets drowned out when you're constantly consuming others' opinions and seeking others' approval. You start hearing yourself again, the small voice that knows what you actually want, not what looks good to want. That knows who you actually are, not who you're trying to appear to be. This is the homecoming, the return to self, the reclamation of your own narrative from the collective noise. And it's not bitter or lonely or withdrawn. It's peaceful, it's whole. It's the feeling of being enough without needing to prove it, of being seen by the people who matter without needing to be visible to everyone. They've found what so many people are searching for in the wrong places, not in likes or followers or viral moments, but in the quiet certainty of knowing yourself fully and being okay with all of it. The good parts and the messy parts, the achievements and the failures, the moments of clarity and the moments of confusion, all of it, held privately, processed internally, lived authentically. That's where they live now, in the wholeness that comes from not being fragmented across a digital landscape, in the peace that comes from not performing for an audience that was never really watching anyway. Closing, so the next time you notice someone who never posts their pictures, who stays silent while everyone else performs, don't misunderstand their absence. They haven't disappeared. They've just stopped performing. They're not hiding from life. They're living it more fully than most. They're just doing it without witnesses, without proof, without the need to turn every moment into material. They've remembered something essential that the rest of us keep forgetting, that being unseen is not the same as being insignificant, that being quiet is not the same as being empty, that the truest parts of you are the parts that never make it to the feed. They've chosen depth over display, presence over performance, being over seeming, and maybe in a world so desperate to be seen, their silence is the most honest thing of all, a reminder that you don't need an audience to have value, that you don't need validation to have worth, that your life is real even when nobody's watching, because in the end, we're not meant to be content. We're not meant to be brands or profiles or carefully curated versions of ourselves. We're meant to be human, messy and private and real. And the people who don't post, they've never forgotten that. Maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's wisdom. Maybe it's the quiet rebellion we all need to understand, that sometimes the most profound thing you can do is keep something entirely for yourself, that sometimes silence is the loudest statement of all. Your life doesn't need witnesses to be real. It just needs to be lived. And maybe that's enough.